Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, today marks 1 year since Hamas launched an unprecedented attack on Israel, killing 1,200 people and taking hundreds more as hostages. Israel's subsequent military offensive in the Gaza Strip has resulted in more than 41,000 deaths. That's according to the local health ministry. We get more from Bloomberg News Israel Bureau Chief Ethan Brunner.
A year ago, Hamas, in a surprise and rather very brutal attack in southern Israel, sought to bring a kind of regional war on Israel. And while it didn't happen right away, if we look at where we are today, with Israeli soldiers in Lebanon, with Israeli airplanes headed constantly to Syria, Iraq, and also to Yemen, and of course with a reconstituted Hamas to some extent in northern Gaza, which shot rockets at Israel today, we are a little closer than one might want to their vision of a regional war with Israel.
Bloomberg's Ethan Brunner in Tel Aviv says Israel is still weighing how to respond to Iran, which launched a salvo of almost 200 ballistic missiles at the Jewish state last week.
Well, Nathan, as Israel is locked in a multi-front conflict, Vice President Kamala Harris says she won't stop pressuring Israel to end its military campaign in the Middle East. Harris spoke to CBS's 60 Minutes.
The work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles, which include the need for humanitarian aid, the need for this war to end, the need for a deal to be done, which would release the hostages and create a ceasefire.
Harris's interview with 60 Minutes airs tonight. And a reminder, you can catch the CBS program every Sunday night on Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington.
Meantime, Karen, both presidential candidates plan to recognize the one-year mark of the Hamas attack. Harris will plant a pomegranate tree on the grounds of her official residence in Washington in memory of those killed. And Donald Trump will attend a memorial service with Jewish community leaders at one of his hotels in Miami.
Well, Nathan, Vice President Harris's 60 Minutes interview is part of a media blitz with less than 30 days until the election. She talked about abortion rights on the Call Her Daddy podcast, and she'll be in New York tomorrow for appearances on ABC's The View, The Howard Stern Show, and CBS's Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Meanwhile, former President Trump is hitting the battleground states. He was in Wisconsin yesterday for his fourth visit in 8 days.
They say that Wisconsin is probably the toughest of the swing states to win. I don't think so at all. I don't think so.
And on Saturday, the former president held a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, at the same site where a gunman tried to take his life in July. He was joined on stage by billionaire Elon Musk.
President Trump must win to preserve the Constitution. He must win to preserve democracy in America.
Elon Musk publicly endorsed Trump after the July assassination attempt.
Turning back to markets, Karen, futures, as you said, are lower as we begin a new trading week. Earnings will be in focus. We get results from big financials, including J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and BlackRock. We get a preview now from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
All three report Friday. Bloomberg Intelligence says their net interest income outlook and capital markets revenue will be in focus following September's Fed rate cut. J.P. Morgan's top line is seen robust on higher trading revenue and investment banking fees, though the bank has said analysts are too optimistic about its 2025 interest income prospects. Wells Fargo likely suffered the biggest net interest income decline among its peers, and estimates show BlackRock's assets under management grew 21%, the largest quarterly gain since 2021. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Charlie, thank you. Well, last week's blowout jobs report is still being felt on Wall Street. The yield on the 10-year Treasury is back at 4% for the first time since August. And Goldman Sachs economists say the probability for a recession over the next year is back at the long-term average of 15%. In early August, Goldman increased the chance of a downturn to 25% from 15% before paring the call to 20% in the middle of that month.
Watching shares of Pfizer in the pre-market, Karen, they're higher by about 2%. Activist investor Starboard Value's taken a stake in the drug maker. We get more from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
We're told the stake is worth about $1 billion, and the aim is to spur a turnaround of the pharmaceutical giant. Starboard has also approached former Pfizer executives Ian Reid and Frank D'Amelio to help in its efforts, and we are told they have expressed interest. Starboard's exact plans and engagement with Pfizer aren't clear at this time. The activist has found that investors and research analysts are frustrated by Pfizer's sustained struggles since the pandemic. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Doug, thank you. Well, Boeing and its machinists union will take a stab at negotiations as the strike against the plane maker enters its fourth week. And Bloomberg's John Tucker is following that story for us. John, where do things stand this morning?
Well, Karen, a federal mediator has been summoned, summoning negotiators for Boeing and the machinists union back to a Seattle hotel today. It's the first inkling movement toward a compromise that might yield a third contract offer. Boeing's last unsuccessful overture, that included a 30% general wage increase. Since the last direct meeting on September 27th, there's been little direct contact between the two sides, and the pressure's growing. Each day of the strike cost Boeing an estimated $100 million in lost sales. And last week, workers lost access to company-backed health care benefits. A Boeing tactic intended to quickly snuff out the strike backfired a couple of weeks ago. That's when the company bypassed collective bargaining and presented a 30% pay raise directly to the workers. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
It's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Florida is gearing up for a massive evacuation as Hurricane Milton strengthens over warm waters in the Gulf. The exodus jammed freeways and led to hours-long lines at gas stations. Milton is expected to hit by midweek. The state is still cleaning up from Hurricane Helene. Governor Ron DeSantis.
I've also directed state personnel and assets to work around the clock to assist local entities as they continue cleanup and dispose of debris from Hurricane Helene.
Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn has more about Milton.
Hurricane Milton continues to develop in the southwestern portion of the Gulf of Mexico. It is likely to become a major hurricane later today. A best estimate right now on landfall is sometime on Wednesday near the Tampa Bay area, and it likely is going to develop into a pretty significant storm event for Tampa. We could see a hurricane going inland on Wednesday with winds in excess of 125 miles an hour and another very significant storm surge. We're going to be keeping a very close watch in this system over the next 48 hours, and any folks along the west coast of Florida should be paying attention. I'm Rob Carolyn, Bloomberg Radio.
Meanwhile, the death toll from Hurricane Helene is more than 230 across 6 states. It is the first Monday in October, and that means the nation's high court is back in session. The Supreme Court justices return to the bench to hear a new slate of cases that tackle everything from transgender care, so-called ghost guns, and even adult-themed websites. 600 workers from 2 Hilton hotels in Boston walked off the job Sunday morning after being unable to agree on a new contract with the hotels. The workers are seeking wage increases and improved pensions. Carlos Aramayo, president of Unite Here, Local 26, the union representing the workers.
While we have made some progress over the course of the last month, as we've been engaged in those waves of short-term strikes, it's really been baby steps, not the strides we need to get to an agreement.
Union President Carlos Aramayo says the striking workers are from the Hilton Boston Logan and the Hilton Boston Park Plaza. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. And it's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. And here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The Mets have finally come home after 2 weeks on the road. 11 games, the last 6 of the regular season, the first 5 of the postseason. They were in 3 cities, went to 2 of them twice, and then Philadelphia, where there was more Mets ninth-inning drama. A 1-out game-tying 2-run homer by Mark Vientos, who had 3 hits, 2 homers, 4 RBIs, but the Phils then came up bottom of the 9th.
Run at second, 2 down. 1-2 pitch to Castellanos. Into left field, down the line, it's a fair ball, and the Phillies have tied the series. Back to Queens, 1 apiece. Castellanos, the hero.
Fox Sports to call. Phillies the 7-6 win. Game 3 tomorrow, a 5 o'clock start at Citi Field. The Padres beat the Dodgers 10-2 in L.A. That series also tied at 1. ALDS Game 2 tonight at the Stadium. Yankees look to go up 2-0 on the Royals. The Giants in Seattle, they had a 15-play drive, got to the 1-yard line, then fumbled. And the Seahawks began the scoring with a 102-yard fumble return, but that was the only time the Giants trailed. They won 29-20. Looked like Seattle was going to kick a game-time field goal with a minute left. It was blocked and returned for a Giants touchdown. Jets in London trailed the unbeaten Vikings 17-0. Aaron Rodgers, 2 first-quarter interceptions for the first time in his career. One of them a 63-yard pick six, and then in the final minute, a third Rodgers interception at the Minnesota 9-yard line. Vikings won 23-17. Fourth straight loss for the Patriots, beaten by Miami 15-10. Fourth straight win for the Commanders, 34-13 over Cleveland. Last night in Pittsburgh, an hour-and-a-half weather delay, and then Dallas won 20-17 on the touchdown with 20 seconds left. The Liberty going to the WNBA Finals. They won 76-62 in Las Vegas, dethroning the two-time champs. They'll play either Minnesota or Connecticut in the final. That series tied at 2. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager on this October 7th, 1 year after the deadly Hamas attack on southern Israel that set off massive war in Gaza. Now, 1 year later, Israel is fighting on multiple fronts and considering its response to Iran as it faces even more attacks today. Joining us this morning from Tel Aviv is Ethan Brunner, Israel Bureau Chief for Bloomberg News. Ethan, good morning. I understand it already has been a tense morning where you sit. Can you get us caught up on what's been unfolding over the last several hours?
Sure thing, Nathan. So this day has been set aside, as you can imagine, by Israeli officials and the families of hostages and all sorts of organizations as a day of mourning and commemoration. And an hour or two ago, Hamas in Khan Yunis and the southern central part of Gaza Strip were able to, despite a year of war against them, send off a bunch of long-range missiles to hit Tel Aviv. I mean, they were, of course, stopped by the Iron Dome system, but we were all rushed into bomb shelters, something that hasn't happened in months. So it's certainly an indication that despite the endless war against them, they have been able to at least reconstitute themselves in enough ways that they could symbolically stick it in the eye of Israel today.
Well, what does this tell us, Ethan, about Hamas's ability to reconstitute itself potentially, despite, as you say, this relentless assault that we've seen along the up and down the Gaza Strip over the last 12 months?
Yes. Look, it's a very difficult question. I mean, it's the right question, and it's very hard to know the answer. I will say that it has been many months since Hamas has been able to fire that kind of missile here, and until a year ago, they could have done it at will. So, and from what we can tell, there are 15 to 18,000 dead Hamas fighters out of about 35,000 who signed up at first. Obviously, they can pick up younger people and keep going. You know, it's a very difficult question. What has happened in the last couple of days is Israel said that in the Jabalia refugee camp area, just around Gaza City, just north of Gaza City, there had been a reconstitution of various Hamas fighters, and therefore they were going into that area intensively and telling people to move south to an expanded humanitarian area. It's just really hard to tell, but there's no question that they've built themselves a very, very comprehensive military infrastructure that Israel has not easily torn apart yet.
I'd have to think, Ethan, that this puts even more of a focus on how Israel could respond to not just Hamas's, but Hezbollah's main sponsor in the region, Iran, after that ballistic missile barrage last week.
Yes, of course, that's the big issue here, which is that there were these 200-ish missiles that hit Israel last Tuesday, I think it was, and Israel has vowed it's going to hit back, and it will, but it's been a negotiation with the U.S. about it, and I think that they've had a little trouble deciding what exactly they're going to do. They wanted apparently to go after oil sites, and the Americans persuaded them not to. I think that the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, is headed to America in the next day or so for consultations. So, yes, I mean, there's an enormous amount of attention on it. A lot of people assume that what they'll do is go after Revolutionary Guard sites in Iran, and I'm not sure why they haven't just settled on that. But they do want to make some kind of a dramatic hit. And, of course, a lot of drama can lead to another retaliation and the eternal fear, which is an actual regional war.
And it raises the question that I would imagine is as difficult as it's ever been to answer, Ethan, which is in our last 30 seconds, unfortunately. Where do you see this ending?
I don't see, look, maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part because I live here right now, but I don't think we're going to have an explosion of war right now. I think we're going to stay in this gray area of back and forth of Israeli soldiers going into Lebanon, Israeli Air Force taking off for the Houthis in Yemen and in Iraq and against Iran, and no clear resolution for the next year or two. That's my instinct, but we have plenty of time to talk about it as we go forward.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.